Reb Shimon. All right. So, of course, we're davening for our pilots and for Klal Yisrael, for Eretz Yisrael, for Jews around the world. Also, I think we can't forget our brothers and sisters that live in Iran. God forbid they shouldn't have any retribution from this. But we don't know. We're in early stages. So we're going to learn Chassidus. We're going to learn the Rebbe Sicha. And that's going to be through Torah, we're going to learn something. We're going to learn a Sicha from a talk of the Rebbe from Tes Zayin Sivan, which is still Tes Zayin in Chutz Laretz. That means it's already the 17th. This is the 16th of Sivan in the year 1966, Tavshin Chavav. Okay, so the Rebbe says like this: Doiver kama pa'amim. We spoke many times. Oidis a parsha shekorim b'torah l'fnei yom tiv misuyim. When you have a parsha that comes before a specific holiday, so there's a connection. Based on what it's taught in the Likutei Torah. It's brought down in the Likutei Torah with regard to the parsha of Nitzavim, that it says Nitzavim is one of the last parshas of the Torah that we read before Rosh Hashanah. The Alter Rebbe brings out in the Likutei Torah that we always read the parsha of Nitzavim before Rosh Hashanah. Umurumas b'milas hayoim dekayal Rosh Hashanah. That's why the parsha of Nitzavim says va'atem Nitzavim hayoim. You're standing here today. Today meaning Rosh Hashanah. It's a hint to the idea of Rosh Hashanah, like it says zeh hayoim tchilas masecha. Shezeu inyan shalachana likras hayomtiv. The reason why we read a certain parshas before a holiday is as a preparation to get us ready, very much connected to the holiday. L'dugma parshas b'midbar, for instance, another time that we have a parsha of the Torah that we always read before a certain time. For instance, a few weeks ago we read the parsha b'midbar. Shekorim la'olam l'chnei chag hashvuos, that we always read that parsha before the holiday of Shavuos. Apita kanas ha'gaonim k'mevor b'Torah, as the gaonim. The Gaonim lived after the time of the Talmud, before the time of the Rishon, a little bit before the times of Rashi and the Rambam, as brought down in the Torah, which is the code of one of the codes of law, is that it says we always read Haftorah Bamidbar before Shavuos. The reason we read Bamidbar before Matan Torah, before Shavuos, is because it prepares us for Shavuos, for Matan Torah. Parshas Nasai, the Rebbe says, in Parshas Nasai, it's not always. There can be, it's not regular, but it can be that Nasai, the parsha we read last week, sometimes also would be read before the holiday of Shavuos. It's not often. The Rebbe says, why do we read sometimes Nasai before Shavuos? It's not by mistake or because the calendar didn't work right. The Rebbe says there's certain times sometimes, because like we know that the way Chassidus teaches, the Hayomim Elu Niskarim V'Nasim, based on what it says in Megillas Esther, that Niskarim, when you remember something Nasim, it's happening now. So Matan Torah is not something that happened a long time ago only. It's also happening every single year. Certain years, in order for us to receive the Torah, we also need to read Naseh before Matan Torah. Al Parshas Bamidbar, that's only sometimes. But the Parshas Bamidbar, we always read Bamidbar before Shavuos. As it's explained, what's the reason why we read Bamidbar before we do Matan Torah? Because what do we talk about in Bamidbar? It's called in English, the whole book of Bamidbar is called the Book of Numbers, because there has to be the idea of counting. It's brought down also in the revealed parts of Torah, in the Agada, meaning like the medrash of the Torah. Kedisa b'medrash. Shematan Torah hutzach liyas l'shishim ribi b'nei Yisrael. One of the conditions for the giving of the Torah, there had to be 600,000 adult males, and therefore we count the Jewish people before Shavuos. Although the counting technically of Bamidbar was after the giving of the Torah, but the idea is counting, so there should be the concept of 600,000 Jews. I'm not certain in the history of the Jewish people. Maybe Rebbe Shimon would know differently. I'm not certain, especially in the Dark Ages, if in Ashkenaz for sure not, that if at all times there was 600,000 Jews, male Jews over the age of 13, alive at all times especially in the Dark Ages, where according to some opinions there are only a few 100,000 Jews. That's something that again above my knowledge. So he says, but if there would be lacking one Jew of the 600,000, we couldn't have Matan Torah. So that's why we read Bamidbar every year before Matan Torah. It's the idea of counting. The Jewish people have to be counted. They have to have that number of 600,000. Ken Yirbu and much more as a condition for Matan Torah. Minyan B'nai Yisrael Shadafka Dezeh by Matan Torah. The numbers, the very fact, it's not just that we have to have the number of 600,000. The very fact that we talk about a number before Matan Torah, we see that the concept of a number is connected to Matan Torah. I mean, it's not just that we have to be counted every year before Matan Torah, and we have to have 600,000 before Matan Torah. But we see there's a concept of counting before Matan Torah, and that has to happen every year. And here the Rebbe is introducing a new idea. That's not just the parshas that we read before a holiday that help us and prepare us for the holiday, but also there's specific parshas we read always after a holiday. And those parshas are also read in order or taking energy from the holiday. Because we know that the order of Torah, Shagam Hu Torah, the Seder, it's a famous idea that the order of Torah is also Torah. What does it mean the order of Torah is Torah? That the Torah says that there's importance to order. And part of the order is not just what comes before, but also becomes after. And because certain parshas always are read after the holiday, it's a proof. There's certain things that we live with in the parsha. That in order to live with that, like the Rebbe would say, we have to live with the times, living with the parsha, based on the teaching of the Alter Rebbe, is you need the Yom Tiv to be able to get ourselves to be able to live with the certain things of the parsha. Obviously, the Rebbe is leading up to the fact that Behaalos'cha, with the parsha that we're in, is always read after Shavuos. What's the idea? We know the rule of Torah is that we have to go, like the Rebbe always quote, from strength to strength. So we're going from the strength of holiday to the strength of the parsha of Behaalos'cha. Even if we're in a strong situation presently, or coming from a strong situation, we can't stay there. We have to go from strength to stronger strength. We have to always elevate in holiness. Page 88. And because we have to constantly be elevating, Nimsa, so it comes out. In order for us to get to the elevation of the holiday, we read the parsha, like we said by Midbar, the idea of counting helps us get to the holiday of Shavuos. But the parsha that we always read after the Yom Tov, like we said before, Nasai is sometimes before Shavuos, sometimes after Shavuos. Means the parsha after the holiday has to be an elevation from the holiday. And in this case, the holiday is a preparation for us to get to the next parsha. The Rebbe gives an example. We said before that Alter Rebbe says that we always read the parsha of Nitzavim before Rosh Hashanah, i.e. to get ready for Rosh Hashanah. And we always read Bereshis after Tishrei. There's never a time that the parsha Bereshis is not read after Tishrei. Why? What is avodah of Tishrei? The avodah of Tishrei is tshuva. That's why the letters of the alphabet go backwards. Taf is the last, Shin Reish means we're going upwards. The month of Pesach is Sadiqim, for the righteous. The month of Tishrei is for the Baal Tshuva, for the one who is returning. What's the idea of tshuva? That we uproot all the negativity from before. And after we've been able to uproot all that. So once we've done tshuva and we've uprooted the negative, so the word bereshis means in the beginning. So we start our life in a new beginning. We're no longer the person we were before Tishrei. Because through the process of Elul and Tishrei, we've become a new person, and therefore we read the Parsha Bereshis, which is the idea of a new beginning, the beginning of the world. Not just that it's a new beginning, we're making new resolutions. Bereshis bara, a new creation. I'm a new entity, something from nothing. What existed before doesn't exist. I'm a new existence. This is opposite or contrary to the avodah of tzaddikim. The tzaddik goes orderly. The Baal Tshuva has the ability to spring forward, to make total absolute change, to be a person one way. And you could say, Bereshis bara, I'm a whole new entity. tzaddik doesn't have the ability to jump, although the name Pesach means jumping and Nisan is tzaddikim. But we'll see if the Rebbe addresses that. Kamoi Bali Tshuva, but the Baal Tshuva has a much greater jump. The Baal Tshuva has the jump. The Rebbe says not jumping with 1 foot, but jumping with 2 feet. What's the idea of jumping with 2 feet? When you jump with 1 foot, 1 foot's always supporting on the floor, so you're not you didn't totally disconnect from your reality. When you jump with both feet, you're totally out of your previous reality. Moving. This brings us to this week's parsha, the parsha of Behaalos'cha. The Rebbe says it's never a fact that Behaalos'cha is read before Shavuos. It's always set in stone, so to say. We read Behaalos'cha after the giving of the Torah. Not like we said before, Parshas Nasai. Sometimes you read it before, sometimes you read it afterwards. Because we need to have the Matan Torah, the experience, the elevation. And the Rebbe is going to explain what this means. Of the giving of the Torah, can we live with the message of Behaalos'cha? Okay. So now that we've had that opening, we're going to try to understand. So now we know that Behaalos'cha is a great parsha. Because in order to get to Behaalos'cha, we have to have the counting. From the counting, which is by Midbar, we have to have Nasai in between. And then we have to have the holiday of Shavuos. And only then can we come to the parsha of Behaalos'cha. So the Rebbe explains. What's the parsha open up with? The parsha opens up with the lighting of the menorah. Shinyana, what is the idea of lighting the menorah? To light up the world. Gemara, as the Gemara says, I don't need the menorah because I need light in the room. That's why King Shlomo made the windows that for the Beis Hamikdash, not that it brings the light in, but it brings the light out. It means we don't have windows, so we could bring sunlight in. The Beis Hamikdash doesn't need outside source of light. The Beis Hamikdash is a source of light. Therefore, the windows of the Beis Hamikdash were projected in such a way that inward was more narrow, and it went broader outside to push the light out. It's called shkufim atumim. Tana shkufim b'fnim, v'atumim b'chutz. It was narrow inside and more wide on the outside. Tsar mi b'fnim, tsar means narrow. V'haroichev, and the broadness was shebachaloin muchser klapi chutz, indicating that the Beis Hamikdash was not bringing in light, but giving out light. Lahaitzi ayra la'olam, to give out the light, starting from the menorah and the other parts of the Beis Hamikdash to the world. V'inyan zeh yochel is dafka de matan Torah. In order, the Rebbe is going to explain this, an amazing idea. How can it be that a physical house, at the end of the day, the Beis Hamikdash is made of natural resources, of stones, of gold, of metals, right, and of skins, all the parts of the Mishkan and the Beis Hamikdash? How could it be that a physical house gives off light to the world? We need Matan Torah, and we're going to see what that means in a second, to allow us to transform the physical into something that can not only maintain light, but to give off light. Ubehegdim, the Rebbe explains. Shlachura any move, and seemingly it's not understood. What's this idea? If you're saying that Behaalos'cha, which means to give out the light, right? That the menorah is the source of light in the temple, and the point is not that for its own light, but to give out light. Who says you need Matan Torah? Who says you need the giving of the Torah in order for the physical space of the Beis Hamikdash of the temple to be a source of light to the world? Even though a person could say that this idea that the Jewish people are a chosen people, God chose us from all the other languages, meaning from all the other peoples. And that happened specifically in Matan Torah, like the Alter Rebbe says in Shulchan Aruch, that happened on Matan Torah. Although yes, Matan Torah, something very unique happened about the choice that God chose the Jewish people. But even before then, the Jewish people were a separate people. Specifically when we left Egypt, right? When we left Egypt, we still didn't receive the Torah. God took us out specifically. He took us out. We read this in the Haggadah. He didn't send an angel. Not another type of angel. Not through a messenger. God himself comes and takes us out of Egypt. And that's a sign of the uniqueness of the Jewish people. So what do you mean to say that only through Matan Torah we became a unique people? Like it says, the verse says, I myself, God, went through Egypt. Like we say in Pesach. God jumped over all the houses, collecting the Jews. The pinpoint, right, that's going on now, pinpoint hits in Egypt, V'refuah Yisrael, and salvation to the Jewish people, healing for the Jewish people. V'alachs kam, even more so. B'kir Samsif, and the Jewish people crossed the Red Sea. Kasher v'yar Yisrael es Mitzrayim meisas vasayam. When the Jewish people looked around them, and they saw the Egyptians are dead, and they're alive. They both went through the sea. And Pari was the superpower of the time. The fact that the Egyptians were nullified, dead. And that because he was the superpower and the ruler of the world. So if, in effect, when Pari is dead, all our enemies are dead. In theory, like we sing in the Oz Yasher, that a fear fell upon all the nations of the world. And what power did the Jewish people have to have the effect of such a fear on all the nations? Is because we were more powerful than other nations. So again, we're seeing that even before Matan Torah, there was something unique about the Jewish people. Not just you're stronger, you're much stronger. The Jewish people before the sin of the golden calf were almost on the level of Moses. Moshe and the Jewish people sang together. Moshe didn't have to sing separately. When does Moshe separate himself from the Jewish people? After the sin of the golden calf, he takes his tent and checks out. Moves his tent to the end of the outside the camp. But until then, it was Az Yasher, Moshe, Uvenei Yisrael. The Jewish people sang together with Moshe. The Lashon Yachid, singular. For Amru, and he said, Zeh Keli Vanveyu. This is my God. This means they're able to point and say, Zeh Keli Vanveyu. This is my God. Certainty, clarity. This is the God of my father already. So the Jewish people are already unique in the times of the fathers. They inherited from their fathers Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov as being a special people. As we find by our forefathers, meaning Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and also the Jewish people as they lived in Egypt, even before they left Egypt. Starting from Avraham. Like it says, what was Avram? Avram acted differently. Avram went around calling out the name of God to the whole world. Like the Torah teaches, like the Gemara teaches us, Shehikri Avram Avinu Lishmai Shekadish Baruch Hu. He made others call out the name of God. And that wasn't just Avram, the tribes and the 70 souls that came down to Egypt. V'nimsa, turns out, so we see clearly that even before Matan Torah, the Jewish people were giving out light to the world. Avram was giving out a light to the world. He was calling out to the world, B'Shem Hashem. So what's the reason? Based on what the Rebbe started off the Sicha saying, that the only way we could read Behaalos'cha, which the idea of Behaalos'cha is the light that the Menorah gives out through the Beis HaMikdash, through the whole world, and the only way to be able to achieve that is through Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah. There was a certain elevation that allowed or made it possible for the Jewish people to really give out light to the world. We were giving out light to the world before then. So Ma'u Atam sheParshas Behaalos'cha Zaneiros Haaretz Ha'olam Dafka Al Achrei Chag HaShavuos of Zman Matan Torah. Why did it have to come after Matan Torah? Again, the cynic is going to say that the Parshas happened later. But the Torah, when you look at the Torah as present, it's not a story that happened 3,000 years ago. Matan Torah happened 2 weeks ago, right? On Shavuos. Today's the 16th. It happened literally 10 days ago. And that happened now. So and we're reading Behaalos'cha now. This week is only because last week we had Shavuos. We had not saying Shavuos. So why did we need Shavuos in order to be able to do Matan Torah? In order to do light, we've been given that light before Matan Torah. So Rebbe explains. And this is an idea that Rebbe spoke about many times around the time of Shavuos. We understand this based on what the Gemara continues to say. What's the idea of the Menorah? So the Gemara teaches us, it was a testimony to all those of the world. Here the Rebbe is going to say this. There's mamish. I chose the Sicha 24 hours ago. And look how appropriate it is to what's going on as we sit here now learning Torah, and for learning on behalf that the Chayalim, the soldiers and the pilots should all come back safely, and the Jewish people should be safe in Eretz Yisrael and around the world. So here it says that what is the idea? The Gemara says, what is the idea of the menorah? It's an edus, it's a testimony.
Andy, are you in a shelter now? What's your looks like your regular office?
I'm in my regular office. When I'm told to go to the shelter, I'll go to the shelter. There's no instruction to go to the shelter yet.
Oh.
So he says like this. We'll understand this based on the Gemara. What's the idea of the menorah? Eidus hu, it's a testimony to all those of the world. That where is the presence of the Almighty rest with the Jewish people. And this extra, not just to give off light, but a testimony that where's God found? Where's the Shechina? The presence of the Almighty is with the Jewish people. That happens with Matan Torah. Ubir Inyan, to explain this. Koydem Matan Torah, before the giving of the Torah, there was a decree. Meaning decree, what does it mean a decree? When God created the world, he made rules. And one of the rules was higher spheres, the worlds of spirituality, won't mix with tachtonim, with things of physical material. And at the same time, tachtonim l'yal physical material things won't be able to elevate to spiritual things. What does that mean? There was a separation. Gzeira miloshin chituch hashnit. Gzeira doesn't just mean a decree. Gzeira also means a chituch, a separation, a cutting. Yiddish shnit means like a slice. Between the higher spiritual worlds and the physical worlds. This idea that the Shechina, because Shechina is the Elyonim, the idea that Shechina should be by the Jewish people, that wasn't possible. It means there was awareness of godliness. God spoke to Avram, but the idea that the Shechina rested by the Jewish people, that didn't happen. And where do we see this also? The very fact that, like the Rebbe spoke many times, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov were not able to make material things holy. This idea that when you take a parchment and turn it into a tefillin or a mezuzah, or you make a shawl, you take physical things and make physical things holy, a davar shebekadusha, that wasn't possible. Avram Avinu, there was no such thing as a davar shebekadusha, an entity of holiness. The only exception to the rule that God gave a gift to Avram was circumcision. So he says, because of this separation, the idea that the Shechina was with the Jewish people. What does it mean to be with the Jewish people? That they become one. To be one entity means Avram had awareness of God, and he taught awareness of God. But to become one with God as a physical being, that wasn't possible before Matan Torah. The Rebbe adds, of course, like I said, there was a connection between the spiritual and the physical, or upper worlds and the lower worlds. The very fact when you say something's above and something's below, right? By definition, that's the idea of a spectrum, right? When you have a beginning and an end, the beginning and the end have a connection. This is the beginning, or this is the bottom, that's the top. If there was no connection between Elyonim and Tachtonim, you couldn't call this the bottom of the top or the top of the bottom. Nevertheless, Kivin Shashem, the name Elyon Shaykh Rakashesh Tachton, something can only be above if there's a below. V'chein Hashem Tachton, so to below Shaykh Rakashesh Elyon, only when there's an above. So what does it mean there was no connection? Nevertheless, before Matan Torah, they were each separate. This is above and this is below. Above stayed above and didn't go down. Yes, they complemented each other. They created each other, so to say. Because again, you can't have below without above and above without below. But they stayed separate. So too about the Jewish people. Even though that they left Egypt before giving of the Torah. Why did God take us out? Why did he give us all this attention? Why does he protect us constantly? And he will continue to protect us at all times. It's because we're children to God. We're God's firstborn. And the protection and the love and the connection between a father and a son is tremendous. Nevertheless, before the giving of the Torah, they were like a father and son, as they're separate from each other. Each one is his own entity. Like the Likutei Torah says, that yes, the father comes initially from the seed The son comes from the seed of the father, and we know in Chassidus explains that the seed of the father comes from his moach, from his brain, and then when the child is conceived by the mother and then given birth and go out to the world, and then he becomes separate. He or she becomes separate from their parents. There's a concept of there's no mysterious nefesh, no self-sacrifice, and you're not obligated. Means a son doesn't have to give up his life for his father. Your life comes first. And if you have a choice to pick up your lost object or your father's lost object, I'm not going into the moral of it. I'm talking about the law. The law says that if you have a choice, you can only pick up one thing. You're running for your life. You have one thing you can pick up, your wallet or your father's wallet. According to Allah, you pick up yours. You come first. Why? Because you're your own entity. As close as you are to your father, you're you and your father is your father. What happened to Matan Torah? We nullified this disconnect. This gezerah, this decree, but like the Rebbe says, gezerah also means gazer, to disconnect. The disconnect is no longer a disconnect. V'nifal hachibur, it was able to combine. El yonim v'tachtonim, below and above. Shal yonim yardel lamata v'tachtonim yal lamayla. That the above went down and below went up. It's not just that we come together, but we become a mitzvah, we become one entity. Right? That's why marriage is what happened in Matan Torah is called a marriage. Through becoming one being. And then that's what it means. The Shekhinah really rests amongst the Jewish people. And this is the reason. Why we read the Parsha of Behaalos'cha after the giving of the Torah. Only after we accomplished on the day of the giving of the Torah that there's a combination, there's a connection, and there's a oneness between Elyonim and Tachtonim. And not only that, we know that it's brought down in the Medrash that when God broke this decree, He says, I'm going to go first. I'm going to be the one who starts. Gilim Ilmaila, it's going to start with a revelation from above. He's not going to wait for us. God spoke to Moshe, tell over to the Jewish people. Gilim Ilmaila, that's a revelation from above. Daber alar and ramarte love, and then He says, speak to Aaron, tell him, Behaalos'cha saneiros. When you kindle the candles of the Menorah. That was an empowerment from above below, that now Aaron has the ability to create light. And like one of the main points of this week's Likutei Torah is the greatness of Aaron, even in comparison to the greatness of Avram, our forefather. Avram still brings his love above from below up because there was the disconnect. Aaron brings from above down, from ilmaila, from above down. So though maybe in avoda you could say that when you have your own efforts, but as far as the level of holiness, the level of or of light, it's much stronger if the light comes from above. The Rebbe adds, what does it mean when we say the Shekhinah? The word Shekhinah is from the word Mishkan, Shachen, to rest. The resting of God. We know there's different levels of godliness. So what does it mean the Shekhinah rests amongst the Jewish people? Why do we say Shekhinah Dafka? So the Rebbe says, he explains. Yedua, it's known. This is a Chassidic concept. The life, the vitality of godliness that gives life to the world. So we know, and we learned many times in Chassidus, that there's what's called the creation of the world, and there's the continuation of the world. So the creation, although the creation that we're learning now, Shar Yichud, the world is happening constantly, but there's the chayis that keeps the world alive. Koyach HaPoyel, the power from the Poyel Benifel, from the giver to the one who's affected. Poyel is the one who creates, who's the Pe'ula, the one who makes the God who creates. In the Nifel, that's affected, that's created from him. Who had darga tachtoinish v'sfiras malchus, and we know that's the lowest level of the level of king. Means level of king, of malchus, of godliness. That's the power of creation. The lowest level is the part that gives life to the world. Chitzainis malchus. It's only the external the malchus. How do we know this? Because the world could exist without Torah mitzvahs. Technically, means it's not a pnimis haratzon. The first comes the world in existence. The world existed 2,000 years before Matan Torah. So he says that the chayis aliki, that creates the world, is what's called chitonis hamachas. It's from the higher levels of spheres and malchus, which is called pnimis and malchus, the inner core of the king. Why am I a king? What does it mean that the Shekhinah rests amongst the Jewish people? That's not the same level of godliness that creates the world. It's a level of godliness, it's what's called Pnimis Malchus, which is connected to the Pnimis Tainug and the Ratzon, of why the creation, that connects to the Jewish people. So it's higher than the life force that's in the world. And the Rebbe says this is what happened before Matan Torah. From Matan Torah. Before Matan Torah, there was godliness in the world. The God Kel Olam, God is the God of the God in the world is one, but it's the way God is a creator of the world. From Matan Torah now, the Shekhinah, the inner Pnimis Malchus, the inner part of the king. What does it mean, the king? King is the level of godliness that wants to create the world, is a king. God wants to be a king. We awaken within God the want to be a king every Rosh Hashanah. Rule over us. God wants to be king. We have to inspire the want to be king. What's the inner want to be king? The Jewish people. Why does he want to be king? Why does he want to have a world? So there should be the Jewish people in the world doing Torah mitzvahs. Like the Rebbe says in the Maimer, not even because we're doing Torah mitzvahs, just because we're being. This is what happened in Matan Torah. Not just the power of God that creates this with the Jewish people, but the power of the inner power of the Malchus, of the want of God, is with the Jewish people. The Rebbe explains. What does this all mean? I'll try to finish this talk. The Rebbe says, even through analytics, a person analyzes creation. A person could prove to themselves. Talking about a person who's trying to figure out if there's a God in the world, right? So a person who thinks for a while, so if you're not, so right, science is going to try to explain this theory or that theory. But what happens if you're going to try to figure out the way it is from a perspective of creation? So you say nothing creates itself. We must say, like Avram Avinu did. You have to say there's something that's creating it. You can't say that a person who analyzes creation, right, who look at his contemplation, like Avram Avinu did, won't come to the conclusion that there's a creator of the world. So you can't say we're totally disconnected from God. Is explained in Tanya, Pirush Baal Shem Tov, what the Baal Shem Tov says, which is based on a medrash. That always your word, God, is standing in heaven. This that God said, let there be a rakia, a heaven. Like we just learned the Chayich Lemuna. The word that Baal Shem Tov says, these words have to constantly be standing there. The power of creation can never give up. It's not, God doesn't create the world where he once he creates, he walks away. If God were to walk away, the world would cease to exist. Its existence depends on God's word constantly being there. And that's true to all creation. Even this physical world, there's the word of God that created every part of this world has to be constantly creating the world. It's an energy that needs to be constantly there, otherwise the world ceases to exist. As it's brought down over there, how those who are the heretics who make a mistake about this, who misunderstand what it means, God's divine providence, what does it mean, a miracle? That they think, their mistakenness. Like the Rebbe quotes in Tanya, that they think that God creates the world like someone creates an object. The Rebbe here is quoting the Tanya. You can't compare someone who takes something that exists and forms something else out of it, whether it is you're going to mix ingredients or carve something or melt something, but you're taking from things that exist. That's a yesh miyesh, something from something. So therefore, the person, the creator, the person who's molding, the person who's carving, could walk away from what they've done. But when something comes from nothing, the nothingness is its true existence. So if God doesn't say that it should stay a yesh, give the perception of its existence, it would fall apart. It wouldn't exist. It would disappear. Like the Alter Rebbe quotes in Tanya, there has to be the power of God constantly giving life to the world. So therefore, a person recognizes there's godliness in the world. Before the Baal Shem Tov taught this. Before it was brought down in the Medrash of Tehillim, before the giving of the Torah. People didn't recognize that. Therefore, the heretics or the non-believers didn't believe in godliness. Even certain Jewish people didn't believe. Surely from the nations. By day Matan Torah, what did Matan Torah teach us? As the Medrash tells us, and the Baal Shem Tov enlightens us, people should recognize that the existence of the world is constantly based on the utterances of God that is happening always. But that's still not what Matan Torah is. The main uniqueness of the giving of the Torah is not just that the existence of the world comes from God, but there's an inner want specifically for the Jewish people. Not just that God is constantly giving life to the world. That existed even before Torah. But that the level of godliness that's above the world, and that's the inner want of the world, but it's not at all revealed in the world, then not only is it in the world, but specifically for the Jewish people. And therefore, it's not just a hidden connection, something that's secret, that the Jewish people know that there's an inner want for the Jewish people. Look what's happening, Mamash. Open the news. When you finish learning, you see the miracles that are happening now tonight. It's an edus, it's a testimony. To everyone in the world, that where's the Shekhinah, where's the presence of God with Am Yisrael, with the Jewish people. As it was clearly indicated in the temple, then in the temple it was clear and obvious the presence of God amongst the Jewish people, all the miracles that were happening constantly in the space of the temple and the happenings of the temple. Right, the Aron wasn't part of the space. That's miraculous. There was a revelation of the infinite of God in the Beis Hamikdash. Even a Gentile. If he would be allowed to walk into the Beis Hamikdash, it wouldn't be a story. If they were able to go into places that the Gentile could go into, or past the place of a Gentile could go into, they would see clearly the miracles that are happening in the temple, and they would see it all the way in the Kodesh, where the Ner Maravi, the light, the western light in the menorah was always lit. That although it had the same amount of oil as its companions, meaning the other 6 lights, it was always the one that gave the fire, and it was always the last one to go out. Never was the one another candle. It was always that. Then the Ner Maravi, the Gemara tells us in Shabbos, that is the Eidos, that's a testimony, the Shechina, the inner want of Hashem, the inner pnimis of the Malchus is with the Jewish people. The Rebbe says, we need that today as well. Though the temple's been destroyed, we don't like the menorah in the temple anymore. This is only the destruction is only with regard to the physicality of the temple. But the spirituality of the temple, that's that's within us and within our power. There's no nation that has the power to destroy the inner, the ruchnius, the spiritual of the Beis Hamikdash, but that's within us. All the parts of the Beis Hamikdash are still there. The menorah is still there. The Aron is still there. The Ark is still there. And this is an empowering idea. That we should take it out from concealment and reveal this idea. Our job is not that it should just remain as a spiritual power that we have. We should bring it out to the physicality of the world. Until the promise that was promised to the world and the Jewish people through our prophets, that when the Mashiach comes, the presence of God will be revealed in all basar, all living beings will see together. It's the word of God that creates and is the life force of the world. With the coming of our holy Mashiach, speedily in our time. And I'm going to stop here, and I want to again Thank everyone for joining us. We shall do a tefillah for Klal Yisrael, for Am Yisrael. We're in the midst of something. It's not behind us yet, and we should continue to only see miracles. It should only be b'chesed, b'rachim, with kindness and compassion. Like the Rebbe says, that after gevuras comes rachmim, after severity has to come compassion. There should be great compassion for Klal Yisrael, for the Jews living in Iran, for the Jews around the world, for the Jews in Eretz Yisrael. And we should have this should lead, this should usher in the coming of Mashiach Tzidkeinu b'meher b'meinu mamash. Good Shabbos, everyone, and take care.
Good Shabbos. Take care, Rabbi.